this is awesome, everybody. My name is Jeff Calmetto. I'm the pastor here at Calvary, and it's my honor and privilege to welcome all of you to our beautiful sanctuary. I've never had so many come to one of my Wednesday night Bible studies, so I'm... In all seriousness, it's a great privilege and a lot of fun for us to host. Mayor, thank you for your service to our city and to you candidates. Thank each of you for your service. I appreciate all that you are doing for our community. We haven't had a political event this big here at Calvary since 1920. Seriously, though, in 1920, 40 members of our church paid $1 each, and we had Western Union hook up a Morse code operator here in the sanctuary. And that night, the whole community gathered because there weren't many places in the community to find the election results. And that night, the place was filled, at least that's what they... And President Harding. I don't... That's it. If any of you love a neighborhood church that's multicultural, young, intergenerational, diverse, exciting, a little crazy, please come visit us on Sundays at 10. But seriously, it's great. Let's...
All right. So much, Pastor Jeff, for being so welcoming to us and for all of the work that the church did to host us tonight. They canceled services tonight to have us here. So I wanted to thank everyone so much for coming out tonight in beautiful Whittier. I'm Lisa Bender. I represent the 10th Ward on the Minneapolis City Council, and I'm really excited to host this first forum here in our community. We have a bunch of people at Lynn Lake Brewery watching. Hopefully not everyone went there. It looks like for them to watch along, and everyone at home. And thank you to the Uptake for making that happen. I wanted to really thank the candidates. They went out of their way to arrange their schedules to be here tonight and share their vision with you. And that's a big deal. We really appreciate it. We have a lot of volunteers here. And one of the big reasons that they're here to support this event is to make sure you all know how to get involved in this election season. So raise your hand if you've been to a caucus before. All right. If you haven't been, now you have a bunch of friendly neighbors that you can ask all about caucusing. April 4th is the caucus. Please go and sign up and volunteer to be a delegate to your ward convention and the city convention. And don't let anyone tell you that that process doesn't matter or that your voice doesn't matter in that process, because it does. Your voice is important, and it really matters if you show up and get involved. Another plug for April 4th caucus night. And then I also wanted to remind everyone that we have ranked choice voting in Minneapolis. So in November, when you go to the ballot, you'll get to pick not only your first choice, but you'll rank your choices. And Fair Vote Minnesota is here as well to answer any questions that you have about ranked choice voting. So after the event, all of the very hardworking campaigns will be in this back room with tables. You can ask more questions if they don't get answered tonight. Meet the candidates, get involved in the campaigns, and then Fair Vote is there to ask and answer any questions you have about ranked choice voting. And a lot of people here can answer questions about the caucus and conventions. So with that, we want to get started and turn it over to Tane Danger, the famous, the amazing, from the Theater of Public Policy. I will plug, which is now in season at Bryant Lake Bowl every Monday. You should go. It is hilarious. Thank you, Tane.
Thank you. Good. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I really prefer to set expectations low. I am the host of the Theater of Public Policy. I am extremely excited. I'm going to go over in just a minute sort of how we do this and how we're going to go through some of these. At the top, some people actually said on social media, are you having the host of an improv comedy show moderate a forum that are much more qualified than me? It's a day without women. And I appreciate that. So, with that, what we've done is we have 6 amazing folks up on stage to answer questions. We have questions from the audience. We're going to be taking questions later in the night from folks. My job largely is to try and keep time, which is really fun, and try and actually get some folks to tell us where they agree and where they disagree. And my hope is that tonight we have a better picture of who these different folks are, and even just how we as citizens should make our decision, whether it's in the caucus or later in the fall. So, with that, I am going to just do a quick opening introduction of all 6 of our candidates. Seconds to sort of introduce themselves, but let me just say who all is up on stage with us tonight, in case everyone doesn't already know them. So, seated right in the middle, Mayor Betsy Hodges, elected in 2013. Prior to that, she served 2 terms at Minneapolis City Council, representing Ward 13. Representative Raymond Dean is first elected to the Minnesota House in 2012. He represents District 59B, which includes the North Side, Bryn Mawr, North Loop, Elliott Park, and parts of downtown. Councilmember Jacob Fry has served on the Minneapolis City Council since his election in 2013 as well. He represents Ward 3, which also includes parts of downtown, Northeast, and the North Loop. Dr. Nakima Levy-Pounds is a civil rights attorney and past president of the Minneapolis NAACP. From 2006 to 2016, she was an associate professor of law at the University of St. Thomas. Aswa Raham is a Minneapolis-based filmmaker, actor, and founder of Cineapolis and its annual film festival. And I should have asked you beforehand, is it the Mezpies? The Mezpies. Yes, very good, thank you. And Tom Hoke founded Hennepin Theater Trust in 2000, which is the managing operator of 4 big downtown theaters. He served as its president and CEO through just earlier this year. He's also served until recently as chair of the Minneapolis Downtown Council and the Downtown Improvement District. So, all right, so as I promised, I wanted to open this up, giving each candidate about 90 seconds to introduce themselves. But I sincerely, I had a real question that I wanted to try and get at with this, which is, you all are running to be mayor of Minneapolis. And some folks here know we have a bit of a strange system in Minneapolis where we have a, thank you. We have a pseudo-weak mayor system. The mayor has some powers, but not as much as in other cities. So, my question to just get started is, why do you want to be mayor? There's a lot that you can do in a lot of other roles. There's an argument to be made that as the president of the NAACP or as a filmmaker, as a city council member, you might be able to affect more change than in this particular office. So, why run for mayor of Minneapolis? What is it that you want to do that you wouldn't be able to do if you're not mayor? And I actually did roll a 6-sided die to decide who would go first, and that goes to Tom Hoke. So,
thank you. Did I win the prize? Thank you for being here, and thanks to everybody who worked on putting tonight's event together. This is really terrific, and I look forward to more of these. I'm running to be the mayor of Minneapolis because I believe we are losing our momentum. We are falling behind. When I look around the country and I look at how other cities are progressing, when I look at a Boulder, when I look at an Indianapolis, when I look at an Austin, these are all cities who are thinking big and acting big and making a big mark. I can't tell you how many times people have said to me, where's our South by Southwest? And while not perfect, have you seen how that has grown and what that is doing for the city of Austin? It's just one example, but it has evolved from a situation where it was based in live music, many of you know, and it has grown into something that is much, much bigger. It is now leading the nation in terms of ideas, in terms of design, in addition to the art and culture that it's creating. So we can have what we want here, and we can grow our economy, and we can grow the opportunity for everyone, but we aren't doing it now, and I want to help us do that.
Thank you so much. Next up on my list was Mayor Betsy Hodges.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming out tonight, and thank you for letting me be here. 4 years ago, when I ran for mayor, I ran on a platform of equity, on growth, and growth that is for everybody, and on running the city really well. I have spent the last 3.5, almost 4 years now, making good on those promises, whether it's a 20-year moving the center of gravity on public safety to a partnership between law enforcement and community. That's the work that I've been doing. And that is difficult and transformational work. It means you have to get in there every day and do the hard work of transformational change. It's not about headlines, it's about outcomes. And he clearly has the people who live in cities in his sights. He is clearly coming after cities and the people who live in them. Whether it is our immigrant neighbors, whether it is trans youth, whether it is low-income people, he clearly has us in our sights. And we get to decide, did we mean it when we said 4 years ago that we wanted one Minneapolis? That we wanted to come together as a community, because we have been putting in the foundational hard work, but we are being tested, and now is the time. And I believe in us. I believe that we did mean it when we said that we wanted to be one Minneapolis, that we wanted to work on equity together as a community, even when it got uncomfortable and difficult and hard. But if we do, then we need a leader who can lead for that city. Somebody who has a spine of steel, somebody who's been tested, somebody with experience standing up to Republicans at the State House and now experience standing up to Donald Trump. We need that kind of leadership for the future. And I posit that I am that leader, and I ask for your support for Mayor of Minneapolis.
And thank you so much, Mayor Hodges. We're going to skip over to the other side of the table and come to Aswar. Thank you. You're next.
All right. Hey. All right. So anyone who looked at the budget as close as I did would also be running for mayor, because that thing's a mess. All right. The reason I'm running for mayor this year is sheer out of necessity. As an entrepreneur, as somebody who is working on several different things, I'm a filmmaker, I'm also a web designer, I got plenty of irons in the fire. This thing kind of derailed all of it. Because when you look at that budget and you realize how much money the city of Minneapolis is wasting, I mean, like outright wasting, we'll talk about this throughout the night, you would want to run for mayor too. Here's the thing. The mayor in the city of Minneapolis has two main responsibilities, the police and the budget, and those are exactly the two places where we have underperformed, severely underperformed over the past 3 years. I think Ryback had us on the right track, but he left too soon, in my opinion. Now, my job as a citizen of this, as somebody who grew up in the city of Minneapolis, whose identity is tied with what Minneapolis is and what it will become, my job is to make sure that I don't allow my city to continue on this track of a completely mismanaged budget and a completely mismanaged Minneapolis Police Department.
Back on time. All right, fantastic. Next up, Dr. Nikema Levy-Pounds.
Good evening, everyone. It's a blessing to be here with you all tonight. The reason that I want to be the next mayor of the city of Minneapolis is because it's time for change. As a law professor, a civil rights attorney, a mother, the president of the Minneapolis NAACP, I had a chance to walk hand in hand with the people of the city of Minneapolis who were sick and tired of the status quo. They were tired of business as usual, tired of hearing about racial disparities and all of the reports that continue to be produced year after year with very little action to address those inequities. I believe in what Paul Wellstone said, we all do better when we all do better, and it's time for our city to start demonstrating that for every single resident in the city of Minneapolis, and not just those in the upper echelon. I believe that I can help usher in the change that will transform our city and make us a national leader in equity and justice for all.
All right, next up, Councilmember Jacob Fry.
First off, thank you so much to the Calvary Church for having us. Thank you to the audience. Thank you to Councilmember Bender for organizing and Danger for hosting here. I ran the Twin Cities Marathon. I fell in love with this city, and the day after graduating from law school, I packed up my car and I moved out here to build a life. And what I found was an activist, engaged community that was fully capable of enacting the change they envisioned. I found a town that in every single sense, they weren't going to settle for pretty good in the upper class. And despite a Donald Trump presidency, despite gridlock at the state and federal legislatures, I still believe that we can be world class. And so what is a mayor in the 21st century that's fighting for a world-class city? How do they handle it? Well, first off, we can end homelessness. We can end homelessness in 5 years, and I commit to do so. Second, we've got an affordable housing crisis. We've lost 10,000 units of affordable housing in the last 15 years alone. We can fix it. We can be the greenest city in the entire country. We can make sure that we've got an economy that fits for the 21st century. And here's the big thing. Right now, more than ever, we need a very visible and present mayor, someone who's willing to lead, build a school in the park boards, and ultimately get results. Not rhetoric, not lip service, but results. And while I am not under the false impression that everyone likes me or everybody agrees with my policies, the things that I pushed for when I ran for city council have happened.
So, by process of elimination, we are at Representative Ray Dean.
Well, thank you, Tane, and thank all of you for coming out here tonight. I'm seeking your support to be the next mayor of Minneapolis. Minneapolis is one of the fastest growing states or cities in the whole region, in the upper Midwest, and I think we've been running from crisis to crisis lately. And I think it's time that we design our city to thrive and have a future that's long-term. For many years, we haven't been thinking about what does this mean 5 years from now? What does this mean 10 years from now? I'm a fourth-generation Northsider, and I'm a proud graduate of the University of Minnesota. And in 2017, we have the opportunity to change city government. My lived experiences are unlike my other opponents. They inform and shape my vision in the way that I see Minneapolis. It's really my vision that creates a cornerstone around equity. To me, equity is about access. Marginalized communities should have the same access that communities that aren't marginalized should have. And, it's great for Minneapolis to be the top of all of these things about, the best in livability, the best health, the best in all of those things. But we're also at the top of the largest disparities between white people and people of color and indigenous folks. And that doesn't happen by accident. And it won't change just by accident. We need to work hard every day to make those changes. I'm a state representative. I understand the relationship between the state and the city, not from the city looking at the state, from actually the state and how we treat cities. And I look forward to leveraging those resources. I ask for the opportunity to meet all of you, hear your concerns, and together we can create a truly progressive Minneapolis.
All right, thank you so much to all the candidates. I know. All right, so we have actual real life Ward 10 residents here to ask some of the opening questions. So thank you so much. Yeah, I do too.
Hi, my name is Paulette, and I am a member of the Minneapolis Advisory Committee on Aging. Ward 10 is my home. Ward 10 has 80% renter occupied, myself included, and more than half of the people across Minneapolis are renters. What will you do about rising costs in our city, housing costs in our city, and what will you do to protect renters from predatory criminal landlords which led to eviction and displacement from the city?
So, thank you. So since we went last with Representative Dean, do you want to take a first stab at that? And okay.
Great. Thank you, Paulette, and thank you for your question. Minneapolis does have a serious affordable housing crisis right now. And part of that is a result that we don't have a lot of rental units out there, and that allows landlords, or vacant rental units, it allows landlords the opportunity to really sort of put it really hard to those renters. And I think that in order to begin to address that, we need to sort of do a few things. One, we need to make sure that we put density in the right places, not just anywhere in the city. And we also need to figure out a way to make sure that we keep what is known as naturally occurring affordable housing.
When you say the right places, what are the right places?
Well, they would be areas that we currently already have density, and they would be areas where we don't have what I would say are traditional neighborhoods, single family or duplexes. So we've seen what's happened in some parts of our city that didn't have housing, like the North Loop and the Warehouse District, which we've now been able to increase density without displacing anyone that was living there, except for a few artists, and I'm sorry that you all got displaced. And then there are ways of looking at those areas in our city that I think need to change. We have some light industrial areas in our city that I think it's time to get those polluters and those folks out of the city, and we need to create opportunities for added housing in those types of areas.
Okay, I want to give other folks a chance to respond to what Representative Dean said or to the question generally. Please.
I'd like to just address the question in general. There's this tendency to always talk about building our way out of the problem, and what the situation is painted as for affordable housing is that we just need to build more and more and more. When you look at the three main reasons that landlords say that they raise rents, there's three of them. There's inflation, property assessment costs, and property taxes. Those first two are natural economic things we can't do much about. Property taxes, though, in the city in the past 3 years have grown twice as fast as the city population. Who does that hurt most? It hurts the person, for instance, this is a real example, a one-bedroom apartment in Uptown that went up $100 more a month in just a single year to cover these property taxes. No improvements to the buildings, no improvements to anything. It's just, that's another $1,200 that person has to eke out somehow in that year. That's how housing is getting so expensive. That is the core of the problem, and I really wish that that's what we'd focus on, because saying that we're just going to build more and more and more, that's only going to drive up gentrification faster and faster. That's not the solution. That is not the solution. And for the second issue, can I just say about the criminal landlords? This is one of the most surprising little hypocrisies that exists within our city government right now. Did you know that within the city of Minneapolis, some of the worst landlords, some of the ones who have the worst complaints against them, are also Tier 1 preferred in that they don't get inspected for 8 whole years? So we're living in a city where that's a reality, and the reason is one property assessor goes in and decides that. To me, that's just reeks of borderline corruption. My job as mayor would be to make sure that anyone who makes a claim like they pick an apartment building that has a lot of complaints, but for some reason they're Tier 1, they're talking to me directly, because that's a problem.
So I saw, I think, Councilmember Fry at least grabbing for a microphone, so does that mean you have something you want to jump in there?
Indeed it does, Tan. So, again, we have an affordable housing crisis right now. 10,000 units lost in the last 15 years alone. It's not like things were rosy back in 2002. And so what we need now more than ever is a very consistent pot of funding that's not competing with your classic city issues of cops and fire and streets. And by the way, it was just announced that we're probably going to be losing a great deal of our 4% and 9% low-income tax credits from the state, which is where we get a huge chunk of our affordable housing fund. We're losing community development block grants from the federal government, and so we need that pot of money. Now, yes, we do need more housing. I am a proponent of density, and I'm an unabashed proponent of density. But along with that density, we also need affordable housing. We need it in middle and upper income neighborhoods. And I'll tell you, what we've done in the 3rd Ward, what we promised to deliver was, one, record amounts of residential increases, and we did. We promised affordable housing in middle and upper income areas, and we've got 50% of median income over at Mill City Quarter. In the North Loop, we're putting up Great River Landing, which is affordable housing at 30% of median income for people with a felony record. And at times, I'll tell you what, people push back, but when it gets tough, when it gets controversial, we say yes in our backyard.
Okay.
I'd like to respond to that if I may.
Sure.
So as
Yep.
the person up here who has actually overseen an affordable housing program, I was the deputy director of the city's public housing authority for 6 years. So I oversaw both the low-rent public housing programs and the Section 8 program. First and foremost, what the city should be doing is making sure that they are protecting those assets. The public housing program needs to be fully funded at what we call 100% of PFS. That is a federal responsibility, and we need to advocate to make sure that those housing units are protected. I understand the needs throughout the community. If you look at Horn Towers as an example, I oversaw the restoration of that particular project and converted some of that to senior-only housing so that we could have that available in our community. For naturally occurring affordable housing, I do think we need to take a hard look at how we incent landlords to keep that affordable housing available. And it might be through a reduction in taxes, as you may have been suggesting. We do. But the other thing is that in order to solve the affordable housing crisis, you have got to look at it on a metro-wide basis. And the mayor of Minneapolis needs to be the chief advocate, getting all the mayors of the other cities to take their fair share, because that is a huge problem for us. And we are not really an island. So that when affordable housing goes away in Richfield and 700 units are dumped onto the market because a hedge fund came in and bought a project, and 700 people are out looking for housing, it affects us. So we have to think on a metro-wide basis.
Okay, we have two more candidates, so I have to do two mildly cruel things. One is, I have to ask you all to hold your applause kind of till we get to the end, just because we have so much to get to and it slows us down a little bit. And so from there, I'm gonna turn it, Mayor Hodges, it looked like you had grabbed the mic there.
Well, housing is one of the things as a community that we come together and get to provide for one another. It's one of the clean water, it's like medical care and health care, is housing. And I know, and thank you for your question, and thank you for your service for the city. I really appreciate that. And I have been a renter. Most of the time that I was a council member, I was actually renting my housing. And so I know that there are challenges that renters face that others don't. But the real question is, how do we provide affordable housing? How do we preserve our affordable housing? And here's what I've been doing. $14.5 million for affordable housing this year to build on 20 years of work I've been doing on affordable housing. We do have, this year, I invested, the innovation in housing was a naturally occurring affordable housing strategy that we are investing in this year and ongoing for the city. And we have, as Tom was saying, of course, we need to make sure that there is housing choice across the region, which is why I partnered with HUD, Secretary Castro and President Obama, to pull together the regional mayors and the regional leaders to talk about, okay, how are we going to create choice throughout the region? And we have that prosperity playbook, and we are working throughout the region to create that affordable housing. But how do we create it in the city in a way that matters? Because people like mixed income neighborhoods more than they like any other kind of neighborhood. And so inclusionary zoning is incredibly important. Driving it where you want it most on our transit corridors is incredibly important. And looking at market rate solutions, not just affordable solutions.
Dr. Levy-Pounds, you obviously get the next word, but we did have a question specifically on this that I want to get folks' thoughts on. It points out roughly 90% of Minneapolis is exclusively zoned for single-family homes. Would you or would anybody else up here look at upzoning this to provide more multifamily housing?
Well, in honor of International Women's Day, I'm going to take the opportunity to answer the last question. As a woman, I have to use my voice in this forum like everyone else, and then I'll get to your second question. Yeah. It's clear, as Mayor Hodges said, that the city has implemented a strategy. And the question is that strategy effective? Has it included input from the residents of Minneapolis, especially the renters, who are crying out for change in that area? And this is something that should not have been recently implemented. We should have known that we would run into an affordable housing crisis several years ago and actually put the resources forward to begin to address that issue. And part of the challenge has to do with the role that the city plays in exacerbating the affordable housing crisis. For example, how many abandoned homes right now are in various parts of the city, particularly North Minneapolis, where there could be pressure applied to homeowners to make sure that those homes are being rented or sold? And what about the number of lots that the city owns? I know that recently the city tried to implement a program to address that issue, but it seems like too little too late. The city has to be much more aggressive in making sure that they are not hanging on to a large housing stock, and we could actually be creating programs that allow people the opportunity to own those homes. We also have to look at the fact that we just raised property taxes. That's going to have an impact on homeowners and those who are landlords, potentially raising the cost of rents, which is going to have an impact on people. Beyond that, we cannot just look at the affordable housing crisis in a vacuum. Part of the reason that people cannot afford to live in various parts of the city is because we have not put forward $15 an hour as a minimum wage for the city of Minneapolis. We need to make sure that renting is affordable for people, home ownership is affordable, and that means making sure that people are able to have a decent wage for the work that they do.
Okay, that is going to be a fantastic segue into our next topic, but I do want to try and get just we don't have time to really go into this, but a sort of yes-no from folks, that question. Would you be open to upzoning areas of Minneapolis that are currently zoned exclusively for single-family homes?
I'll jump on that first.
Please be, yes, brief is all I'm going to
Yes, and we need to look at inclusive zoning. It's not just a question of yes, it's a yes and. And I think first, before we do anything, we need to acknowledge that race is a clear issue in housing in the city. Before we address inequities in housing, we need to acknowledge that race has been a huge part in how our cities develop. We're very, very segregated, and we need to begin to tackle that very directly.
Okay, yes.
It's also an opportunity to give Lisa Bender some credit because she led the work at the city to make sure that people could apply for accessory dwelling unit licenses, which means that if you have a garage that you want to turn into an apartment or you have a carriage house, you can actually, which is a little bit of a way to upzone in single-family areas, but we have a ways to go, and inclusionary zoning is a really important way, and I've been doing the work at the city to help.
And so is that just a yes on the looking at upzoning parts of Minneapolis that are currently zoned for single-family?
I think it's a yes, I agree with Ray. It's a yes and.
Okay.
So I think we really need to create a conversation in our community that this is about everyone working together, and unless we do that, we're going to be doing it neighborhood by neighborhood. The reality is that we are going to have to develop project-based assistance in order to create housing opportunity throughout our entire city.
And so
my
that's a
answer
yes.
is yes. My answer is yes. Yes, but I think it's not just yes and that's it, okay?
Sure.
It's yes and more.
As an
Okay.
improviser, I love all these yes ands. This is fantastic.
Yes,
Yes.
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 Okay, fantastic. I'm going to move on to our, this side of the table gets an extra 5 seconds next round. All right.
This is great. You guys already kind of mentioned the question I was going to ask you, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Hi, I'm Isra. I live in Whittier, and I work in the service industry as a server bartender. My question to you all is, do you support an ordinance that raises the minimum wage to $15 without a tip penalty and supports working families? Do you support a fair workweek scheduling policy that also accounts for unpredictable scheduling? And would you fight against preemption of these and earn in sick and safe time at the state legislature?
So we'll... Last time, why don't you jump in first here?
I think you all are pretty familiar with my answer, which is absolutely yes. We know that 68% of residents of the city of Minneapolis support raising a phased-in minimum wage. We know that the current system disproportionately affects people of color and single working mothers. And 51% of the people who are currently minimum wage workers are actually white. So it affects our white population as well. I believe that if we pass a $15 an hour minimum wage, of course, no tip penalty, of course, continuing to protect workers with sick and safe time, maternity leave, all those things are vitally important for us to have a healthy city and to be, again, a national leader in equity and justice.
Can I just, I hasten to ask simply, is there anyone up here who disagrees with the idea of the city raising the minimum wage to $15, just to kind of cut to the chase?
I do.
Okay. Okay, yeah, let's do both. So, Aswar, if you want to go first, and then we'll go down to the other side.
Perfect. The idea of people in Minneapolis being paid fairly for their work is not what I disagree with. What I disagree with is that we're doing the same experiment over and over again. With the Working Families Agenda, what we tried was to enforce this idea that everyone has to set schedules a month ahead of time. And what do we see there? The forces of economics are pretty strong. And it's hard to just force this in and expect everything to be fine. Here's what will happen if we just unilaterally decide as a city, oh, the floor wage will be doubled what the state level is basically at the moment. Here's what will happen. Every single business on this side of France Avenue will move to that side. Every single small business owner, like my mother, would have incredible difficulty hiring any help, so she'd be back to those days when she was working 14, 15 hours a day because she cannot afford help. So what I disagree with in our current political climate is everyone's climbing over each other with this very irrational idea and pretending that it's going to somehow work out fine, even though we have evidence from 2015 that it's not going to work out fine, that there are certain parameters that we have to work with.
All right.
Okay, I wanted to add to that and just say, I thought that the city set up a process that involved listening sessions, and I know it because I'm going to all of them. And the idea was to make sure that the city went out and it heard from everybody who wanted to talk about this issue. As I further understand it, the city does not currently have a proposal in front of it because the proposal was going to come from the listening sessions. And then the city council was going to be taking a look at that. So I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's let everybody have their say. That's the way you make policy. Leadership is about listening, not just reacting.
Mayor Hodges, you're holding a mic, so yeah. It looks like you're trying to jump in, so yeah, go nuts.
Well, it is ridiculous that there are people who are working full-time and living in poverty. Let's just start with that premise. And when I started as mayor, I met with advocates in my office about what it would take to create not just the workforce of the future, but the workplace of the future. And out of that came the Working Families Agenda, which I proposed in my first State of the City address. And it had in that fair scheduling. We tried to get a way down the road with that. We couldn't find a solution that would work in the time frame we had given ourselves, but I want to make sure that we continue to have that conversation. But we did focus on earned sick and safe time. Now we have earned sick and safe time. Now the conversation's about minimum wage. And it's an important conversation. I think one of the key things we have to decide is, do we want to leave women behind? Do we want to leave low-income, mostly women of color behind? Because a lot of the tipped workers in the city of Minneapolis are low-wage women of color. So I oppose a tip penalty. That, for me, has to be part of that conversation moving forward. And I appreciate Frank Hornstein actually introduced a bill today for regional minimum wage in the metro region. So thank you very much, Representative Hornstein.
So that's starting to get to another piece I want, but I want to get all of the candidates on the record because we're starting to see some of the differences here. So we have a couple of views on minimum wage. Let's talk about the tip credit penalty, credulty. So we have an answer there from Dr. Levy-Pounds, from Mayor Hodges, council member, minimum wage, and whether you support including tips in that.
Absolutely. So 2 years ago, before it was politically expedient, before it was an election year, I came out in favor of a minimum wage increase. And in the last 2 years, despite opposition that did exist at City Hall, I worked with my colleagues to find a solution. And yes, we looked at every single route to find a way forward to uplift workers of every single category. We worked on that solution. There was a couple things that came out of it. First, we recognized that massive conglomerates and franchises like McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's, they could raise the minimum wage to $15, and they should be doing so on a relatively quick time frame. But simultaneously, you also have some of these small local businesses, and these are our neighbors, these are our friends, these are people who are not getting rich off of the whole system. And yes, we should be hearing them out every step of the way. And then let's talk about sort of the restaurant industry. Now, I worked in restaurants. I was a server. I was a prep chef. I sliced green peppers and onions. I worked at the front of the house. I worked at the back of the house. I washed dishes. And I fully recognize that these people they need every single dollar. They're trying to pay the rent, they're trying to pay the mortgage, they're taking care of their families. And I also recognize that at the state level, we have a very, very long history of not distinguishing between tipped workers and everyone else. And I recognize that, I understand it, and I fully appreciate it. Now, as Tom said, we have a process right now that is moving forward, and I believe I'm the only one on this stage that will be voting on this proposal. And so, yes, I'm going to work with my colleagues to figure out a strategy that works.
So that's
It is, and when I make a promise that we're going to hear people out, I do. I am not going to be answering to any sort of special interest, regardless of who it is. I answer to the people of Minneapolis, and when I made a promise to the people of Minneapolis that we were going to hear people out the entire way, I keep my promises.
Representative Dean?
Wow, thank you. So just for the record, I'm the only candidate up here who's actually raised the minimum wage. We raised it at the state. And ours did not include a tip penalty. The state has not included that for over 30 years. Raising the minimum wage from $7.25 to $9.50, where it is today, has added $5.4 million per day that's circulating in our economy. One of the reasons why we're doing well as a state when other states aren't doing quite so well is we have a very active economy in the state of Minnesota. And I believe that everybody that works full-time in the city of Minneapolis should get a livable wage, and that wage right now is determined to be $15 an hour. Now, you had also asked about preemption.
I did. I was going to ask about preemption.
In that question, and I will tell you right now, I voted against it. I spoke against it on the floor, and I think that doing something like that statewide is very dangerous. The average rent in Minneapolis is over $1,300. The average rent in Worthington, Minnesota is $600. Should we be imposing $15 an hour on the city of Worthington? I'm not so sure we should. Their cost of living is different, but the cost of living in Minneapolis is much, much higher. And so I will continue to fight at the Capitol, and I will also add one thing that's really, really critical is we need to begin to create intergenerational wealth and in communities of color.
So I want to follow up on this question of the range of this. There's the preemption piece. There's also the other side of that argument is Minneapolis potentially going off by itself, and some might call that leadership, some might call that becoming an island, I think is a term that we've already heard. So how do you, if you're mayor in 2019, approach that challenge of both being a leader, but then not getting so far ahead of the rest of the state that we are seen as crazy?
Well, I still have the mic, so I'll run with that. One, I don't think we're crazy. I don't think we were crazy when we passed the Clean Air Act in the city of Minneapolis. Currently, we have that as a law in the state. States have always led the national policy and government, and cities have always led states on moving things forward. We can sit back and say, yeah, it's going to create an island, and I would say that no one here would intend for our businesses to leave the city.
But Representative Dean, you were voting on a piece of legislation that is specifically created because Minneapolis is moving forward on things that other parts of the state are suggesting are wrong as far as raising the minimum wage to $15 or earn sick time and whatnot. I mean, that's a real thing to have to worry about, I think, if you are proposing taking the city ahead of the rest of the state.
I would say, first off, it's a bill that's written by ALEC. It's not a bill written by a legislator in the state of Minnesota. This is something that's being done nationwide by conservative members throughout the United States to try to go after urban areas which tend to be progressive parts of our country. When you look at population growth, urban areas and tends to be more progressive. So this is a clear attack on our democracy, and I think we need to stand apart. And we need to say, you know what, we're going to lead on this, and we will make it work. Ultimately, the pieces that are going to be critical are going to be in the details. How do we make sure that we assist those businesses through a process? Let's forget, wage is only one part of an equation that includes issues around public safety. It includes issues around education. It includes issue about stable housing. I mean, we've been talking about those.
Yes.
So this is just one piece of what I would say is a much, much larger complex puzzle.
Okay, I've got multiple people grabbing for microphones on this question of regionalism.
Regionalism?
Well, you were grabbing before that, so
Thank you, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, can I just point something out? In 2015, well, not 2016, when $15 minimum wage was going for the route to referendum, when they got every single thing they needed to do to get on the ballot and to make it clear what the opinion of the city of Minneapolis is, what the opinion of our people are, every single person who's now advocating for a $15 minimum wage was against it at that point. Yeah, how do we forget that? How do we forget? Thank you for applauding. You have a great applause. But here's the thing. That's what I'm saying about political convenience. Is all of a sudden it became convenient to preach this gospel that they were completely against the referendum. And I believe, Councilmember Fry, you went on record as saying that you do not believe this is the way to run a city, through referendums. Well, you political leaders are walking referendums. You were made through the same process that people want to express their opinion. And so I believe there's a huge suspicion in my mind to this whole conversation during a political season. Right when last year, when this exact same thing was coming up, everyone was gung-ho about shutting it down and making sure it doesn't.
So I was just going to add, and you said the word, this is a nuanced conversation, hence the importance of listening to people. It may be that a proposal needs to separate out small businesses from larger businesses. But we don't have a proposal in front of the City Council right now. And until we've completed the listening sessions, which may give us that nuance, we aren't going to have one. So I advocate for continuing to listen to everyone, engage the whole community, and then go from there.
Thank you. Councilmember Fry, you were trying to jump in, yes. Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
I've actually been waiting for a while.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
I want to echo some of the things that have been said. I believe that someone needs to have the guts to lead, and it needs to be the city of Minneapolis, just like we did with Sick and Safe Time. And after we did so, in passing that, we saw the city of St. Paul follow suit. And I believe that other parts of the region will also follow suit because it is the right thing to do. This is not a number that's being pulled out of thin air. We've seen places like Seattle able to thrive by raising the minimum wage, and there's other places across the country. We also saw from the economic impact study that the city of Minneapolis commissioned that we need at least a $15 minimum wage, and that it would cost $23 an hour for a single working person with one child to actually be able to afford to live in the city of Minneapolis. So what we're talking about is the bare minimum when it comes to equity. Now, a lot of people up here are talking about how they support racial equity. I hail from a community that bears the brunt of political expediency, of rhetoric surrounding racial equity, and chronic neglect of communities of color. It is time for us to get serious about racial equity, and passing a $15 minimum wage is one way that we get there, not to mention single mothers with children who are constantly being left behind in this conversation, and I think that that's completely unacceptable. So we need some guts, and we need to do the right thing.
All right, now, and I apologize from before, but Councilmember Fry.
So there was some questions about, what is the policy we're going to propose? How do you propose that policy? Well, yeah, we do have ideas about that. I do have ideas about this. We could implement a $15 minimum wage for larger businesses. Phased in, we could implement a narrower minimum wage for smaller businesses at, say, $12.50. You could change the phase-in to allow smaller businesses to continue to succeed as the minimum wage rises. These are things that could move forward, and none of this, by the way, needs to include tips. I do think that it's important that we first have the process. Nuance is not a four-letter word at city government. And by the way, my position on, one, the minimum wage, and two, the referendum has been exceedingly clear. For 2 years, it's been exceedingly clear. For the minimum wage, against the referendum, and I'll give you a really quick rundown of why. I do not believe in legislating via referendum. When you legislate via referendum, there's a number of things. First, you're forced to set the language maybe 6 or 7 months in advance, and when you do so, you can't change it. You have to get it set, you have to go through the Charter Commission, you got to go to the full council, and then there's a vote. And in every piece of major legislation that I've ever been involved with, there's major changes that happens in the last 2 weeks alone. In the last 2 weeks alone, and paid sick is included in that. We made major changes in the last 48 hours, and you need to be able to account for nuance at city government. Second, we did not want to set a precedent. We did not want to set a precedent that would allow literally anything from getting on the ballot down the road. This is my job. I dig into it, and I respect the work that goes into figuring out how to craft these policies. And do I want a referendum going on the ballot at some point in time that says we're going to freeze property taxes? Sounds like a great idea on paper, but practically speaking, no, it's not. So these are the hard decisions that we are forced to lead on, and yes, you do need to step forward to make sure it happens.
So we have a batch more topic areas to jump into, but it was pointed out to me that we didn't maybe get an answer from all the candidates on specifically the question of, do you support a fair work week scheduling policy that accounts for unpredictable scheduling? And in this case, just so that we can get to the other two main issue areas, I really do hope we can do a yes or a yes and or a no.
Well, Tane, because it is in. You did ask a question about preemption, and you did ask a question about Minneapolis going it alone. Preemption is bad governance. Republicans love local control until local governments are doing things they don't like, in which case they introduce preemption bills. It's not a good way to govern. It's not a good way to govern. The president's doing the same thing to states and local governments that Republicans are doing to local governments around the country. I do believe I want a minimum wage at the largest possible jurisdiction. I believe the largest possible jurisdiction is the metro area. It's why I was working with legislators to put together a bill. The path is narrower given the results of the election in November, but it was introduced today by Representative Hornstein, which I appreciate. But Minneapolis is going to be moving forward, and it is a conversation. I've been at those listening sessions as well. There are lots of levers and lots of things that could or could not go into that final policy, but what I know is that the tip penalty should not be one of them. And I already talked about scheduling, so.
Scheduling, can we go down the line, a fair scheduling policy? Oh.
Yeah, I believe that fair scheduling is important. I think that individuals that are employees should have the option of knowing when they're going to work. This whole notion of, what is it called, clopen, where some individuals actually, close at 12 o'clock at night and have to be back at 8 o'clock in the morning. I think that in many ways that's something that not only to do. I don't understand how employers run a business that's successful if that's the type of practices that they do. So I think that it's important that employees be involved in a conversation. I think there's no reason why an employee shouldn't be able to switch a shift with someone else. So I think there are nuances around fair scheduling as well.
Fantastic. Yes, I love it. Good. Over this way?
Yes, but not through a direct mandate from City Hall for some reason.
Yeah. The scheduling, do you support a fair scheduling policy at the city?
It depends what it looks like.
Yeah,
No, do I support a mandate to schedule 28 days in advance, followed by some sort of fee if any of it changes? No, I do not. Certainly not on a universal scale. There is nuance that we have to account for in city government. And you need to be able to narrowly tailor these laws to specifically target some of the bad actors. If the bad actors are McDonald's or Wendy's or Burger King, by all means, yes. However, if the actor that we're talking about is a funeral home, I had one call me up and said, needless to say, we really can't schedule that far in advance because we don't know when grandma's going to die. These are the nuances that we actually have to legislate on. This is a reality that we're working in, and it's not a simple yes or no answer as much as we'd like to pretend that it is.
But Jacob, as you know, as an attorney, there are always ways to carve out an exception, like the funeral home exception. Yeah. The reality is that some of these positions are very privileged. The average person would want to know when they have to work, especially if they have children that they have to get to school, children that they have to take to daycare, and to be able to effectively plan the rest of their lives, especially if they're trying to get a college degree, et cetera. So yes, we need fair scheduling. And one thing I have to add as a nuance to what Mayor Hodges said is that it's not just the Republicans that we have to watch out for. It's DFLers who are comfortable with the status quo, who have had years to make changes to these policies and practices that would benefit all of the residents of Minneapolis, and not just jumping on the bandwagon when it's politically expedient to do so. The time for change in the city of Minneapolis is now.
Fantastic. Let's bring that round of applause back for our next question asker.
Hi, my name is Isabel. I'm a senior at Southwest High School, and I'm from Uptown. Police training and implicit bias has been an important topic in my school and community, and is also very important to me. So I want to hear your approach to the city's reforms to policing over the past several years. Are you supportive of these changes? What has the city done that you would champion, or what hasn't the city done that you would champion? And how would you work to combat implicit bias within the police force?
Fantastic. Representative Dean, do you want to
Sure.
take the first one?
I'll take that. So I've already been involved with a bill that actually funds training of officers, that it will include implicit bias as part of that, as well as identifying situations where people are in mental health crisis, as well as teaching officers to understand where mediation might be more important in dealing with a situation than pulling your gun. I think when we talk about issues of policing, we need to be real. It's a culture that needs to change. And that culture starts at the top and goes all the way through the ranks. The first interaction that an individual has with a police officer should never be, put your hands on a car. We know that people of color and indigenous people, they shouldn't be afraid when they see a police car. But unfortunately they do. And we know that crime is a litmus test for the health of a community. We need to really think about where our officers live, what they look like, and what they do. And I think the number one thing that we can do to begin to change that is demilitarize our police.
So,
let me just say that the militarization of police has created a barrier between police and community members. And unless we get rid of that barrier, the relationship between officers and police in the community will not change. So that needs to be the first thing we do.
So I'm going to try and push all the candidates on this because, and I think you're starting to get to this toward the end of that answer, but as mayor, what are the steps that you take to make some of those changes that you're talking about happen?
Well, I think that first the city has to look at the 21st century policing policy that was put forth by the administration, I believe it was 2 years ago, and we need to build upon that. Community trust and justice, and that's working in the city. I'm sad to say that it took, in many ways, we should have been down the road a lot farther before Jamar Clark was shot. This is something that's been pervasive throughout our city. We know we've had policing problems, and we need to change that. And that's one of the areas that we know the mayor has an opportunity to address. And it's something that we need to do, and we need to do it now, because we can't wait and continue longer down this path we've been going.
Mayor Hodges?
Well, everybody in Minneapolis needs to be safe and feel safe in every neighborhood that they find themselves in. And that includes in the environment that they're in, and when they call 911, they have to know that they will be safe when they call. And you know, the opening that was created by the community conversation we've been happening for the last year and a half started before. It was one of the first things that happened when I became mayor. We asked to be part of the National Initiative for Building Community Trust and Justice. We have a report that you can see online that shows how we as a police department have done, how we have responded to every pillar of the 21st century policing report that the president put out. We have changed our policies, our de-escalation policies, our sanctity of life policies. Every officer who responds to a 911 call has a body camera on. We have an EIS policy that we are putting into place. We are doing community policing so that officers will be getting out of cars and building relationships so that they will know the people that they serve. Thank you. Yes, I think that's worthy. That I have put more than $1 million in for community service officer classes. That is the best ladder we have to make sure that our police officers reflect the communities that they serve. And yes, Isabel, to your question, we have done implicit bias. Every officer has been through implicit bias training. Every officer has been through procedural justice training. Every officer has been through crisis intervention training so that they know better how to intervene in situations where somebody has a mental health crisis. There is no city in the country who is doing all of what we are doing to build that trust, but it takes time. And it takes implementing every single thing we can implement and letting it take the time that it needs.
Okay, Dr. Levy-Pounds, yes.
Yes, one of the first things that happened after Mayor Hodges became mayor was that the community held a forum, and I believe City Council member Alondra Cano was one of the people who organized that forum, and we invited the chief of police, and we invited the city attorney to come and hear the community's concerns about police reform. Now, we packed the auditorium at Sabathany, but guess what? The mayor did not show up, the chief of police did not show up, and neither did the city attorney. And the sad part about all of that was that we had person after person standing up and saying that they wanted to see changes in the city, saying that they wanted to see a true community policing model, saying that they wanted body cameras to be placed on officers in the city, and saying that they wanted to see accountability and better training. Now, there has been a little bit of progress that's been made, but definitely not enough. Jamar Clark should not have had to been killed, shot in the head at point blank range for our government leaders to wake up to the crisis that exists within the Minneapolis Police Department. They have known about these issues for decades. As a matter of fact, the studies show excuse me, that our city government settled more than $20 million in lawsuits, excessive force lawsuits, over the last decade. If that doesn't signal a problem, I don't know what does. The fact that over 90% of police officers do not even live in the city of Minneapolis is a major problem. And the overwhelming majority of officers are whites. So you have people coming into various parts of the city who don't live there, who don't know the residents, and who don't even get out of their cars to engage the people. But let someone walk across the street and spit, and the next thing you know, they may be given a citation or even arrested. And if it weren't for the people standing up and saying, we want to see an end to ordinances against lurking and spitting, we would still have those Jim Crow laws on the books in the city of Minneapolis. Because they were being used as a pretext to stop, frisk, and harass young African American men. So the city needs to overhaul our system of policing and not just do enough, but we need to have a world-class police department that treats every resident with dignity, not based on the color of their skin in terms of discrimination, but sees the humanity of the people and treats them with respect. And community policing is not just going out serving hot dogs and taking photo ops. So that's not community policing. There are tons of examples on the books, because I believe in evidence-based practices. Remember, I spent 14 years as a law professor. And I've studied community policing, and what we're doing in Minneapolis is far from that.
So this is my follow-up question then, is can you give us a couple of examples of things? You're mayor in 2019. What are the 2 to 3 things that you say, these are actual policies that I want to see happen now because we're not doing them currently?
Absolutely. So the first thing that I would do is to implement a true model of community policing. And that means real engagement of residents. It also means making sure that we are focused on major crimes in the city and not just petty offenses, like I mentioned, like spitting and lurking. And so what you need are officers who are not just trying to arrest people and give them citations so that at the end of the year, they can look like they were the best officer. They receive commendations for how many people, are given citations or arrested, et cetera. That's not what we should be rewarding. Public safety in our budget that is being put to good use and not going down the abyss of the criminal justice system. We need to make sure that we're focused on solving homicides in the city and
Amen.
not cracking down on the pettiest of behavior of people in the community.
Okay, we've got a couple people who want to jump in. I believe Aswar was trying to get in, and then I promise I'll pop over here, okay?
Yeah, I'm having a tough time because this is not how my brain works. I like, if you want a plan, here's the plan. As soon as I get elected into office, what happens is this. First and foremost, there's a massive recruitment drive specifically targeting Black, Latino, and women people in the city of Minneapolis. So there'll be 179 of these drives, and these are all planned out. If you go on my website, voteoswar.com, you'll see the 200-week plan. It's actually all just laid out in there because that's just the kind of person I am. What we need in the city, first and foremost, is a police department that's properly staffed. I don't know if you guys know this, but we're about 100 officers short of per capita where we should be. And line that up with this, the fact that % in 3 years. Let's not ignore that factor. There's 500 more violent crimes happening now than when the previous administration, or the current administration, took office. So to solve this thing, first we need to restaff the police, like proper staffing levels. That's just a mathematical fact, but we need to make sure as many of those officers, legally possible, are Black, Latino, or women. The second thing is that we have to make sure that the police are insured. And I know this is one of the ideas that got ran over in 2016. It got ran over. And because our city, for a democratic city, tends to be very afraid of democracy, where people actually get to decide how their cities run. So ensuring the police is something that needs to be done because, like Nakima pointed out, we pay out tens of millions of dollars each year in liability payments, and it messes with the incentive system. The city all of a sudden has an incentive to defend bad police officers so they avoid litigation. And the citizens of the city came up with a brilliant idea. They brought it to their city hall. And the city hall basically ran out the clock on that referendum. They still don't have a clear decision from Supreme Court. So I'm saying is there are clear exact things like this. Restaff the police, diversify the police, and make sure the police have insurance, for God's sake.
Mr. Hope, do you want to?
So I wanted to follow up on what Nakima was saying because I agree. The most serious crimes in this city, the Part 1 crimes, the rapes, the murders, the assaults, are not being solved. In fact, only 1 in 10 is being solved, whereas if you're an African-American man or a Native man and you're smoking dope, you're going to get stopped. And let me tell you, I don't think those individuals are smoking dope at any higher rate than white folks are. But the other thing is, I mean, I think we have to keep thinking about what is it that we're trying to do here. You know, the police can't always be the response. And I know that we have done some experiments when I was at Hennepin Theater Trust on Hennepin Avenue with really figuring out new ways to engage people. And it isn't always a police response. You know, it is deciding that there are a variety of ways to engage people, and people who aren't, you know, it's not a crime to be poor. It's not a crime not to have anywhere to go. Okay, so we need to figure out how are we going to enable everybody to feel safe where they are, particularly with downtown, which was where I spent a lot of time. You know, what we learned was that we say to everybody, come on downtown, it's a great environment, you're all welcome here, and then we say, except for a few people, you're not welcome here. We can't do that. We can't do that anywhere in our city. We need to make sure that everyone feels like where they're at, there is open and welcoming to them.
So my go-to question with this topic, can you give us a couple of those things that either you tried previously and you think should be on a citywide basis, or something different that actually accomplished what you're talking about?
You know, it's, I can, but I wouldn't prescribe what we did for our situation citywide, because that actually wouldn't be consistent with community-based policing, because that wouldn't be listening to the community. But what we learned is that when we had ways to attract people and engage them, you know, they were engaged, and they weren't engaged in unlawful behavior. You know, on Hennepin Avenue, great example. You know, we had people who were there because it was this, you know, I had marquee lights on. It was interesting. It was fun. It was a social opportunity. So people would come there, and, you know, but our job was to make sure that we provided an opportunity for them to be engaged, because if we didn't do that, it turns into a police activity, and police aren't that's the wrong tool in the toolbox to address whatever the situation is.
Councilmember Fry, I want to give you a chance to weigh in on this question generally of policing, and the question from our audience member specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we do need to move away from some of these petty crime offenses that result in people going to prison for very long terms. You know, people always talk about marijuana being very safe. Well, I'll tell you, it's not that safe if you're a black man or one of the thousands and thousands of black men that have been in jail for a long period of time. By the way, I am for legalization of marijuana. I have pushed I have pushed specifically for decriminalization in our city, and that is a step that we need to take. Now, simultaneously, as Nikema pointed out, yeah, we do need to be looking at some of these more violent crimes and these shootings, and it has happened on a regular basis. So in addition to implicit bias training, which needs to be expanded, in addition to procedural justice, in addition to recognizing that when a cop is tired or hungry or sick or forced to make a split-second decision, yeah, that bias comes out. That bias comes out in everyone, including myself, and I think we need to acknowledge it, especially as a white male, that we have it. We need to confront it. We need to deal with it. Now, simultaneously, we need to make sure that the cops do have the ability to community police. And that means that they have the time to get out of the car, to talk to the small local business, to get to know the residents, to get to understand the street, and then to proactively keep people safe. And that is most definitely the direction we need to be going.
Okay, we have our next round of questions from another Ward 10 resident.
Hi, my name is Katie, and I'm a Wedge neighborhood resident. And my husband and I bike and walk to 95% of our destinations within the city. So my questions are, do you support continued funding for protected bikeways and pedestrian safety? It has already done to make walking and bicycling more inviting and accessible to people of all ages.
So I have not given the mayor a chance to go first yet, so Mayor Hodges.
Well, Katie, you said? Thank you for the question. And yes, I do support that. And it's what I've spent a chunk of my time doing for the last few years, and even while I was on city council. Because we have to grow this city for everybody. And that means that our transit and our transportation system has to really address people who otherwise historically have been left behind. People who bike and who walk and who use transit by choice or by necessity. And historically, there are a lot of communities that have been left behind. And so that's why I have been, we are on the cusp of a complete street design revolution in the city of Minneapolis, and I've been leading us toward that. We have a transportation planning division in Public Works that we didn't have before. We have a fabulous new Public Works Director, Robin Hutchinson. I was meeting with her today, and she is great, and she gets this vision of making sure that we have all the options available throughout all of the city. That I made sure that when we were talking about funding for parks, I made sure that we had funding for streets, because we have $800 million for the next 20 years for parks and streets in a 2-to-1 ratio, streets to parks, for how much space and how much of that asset that there is. Because as we redo those streets, we're going to be able to implement this revolution in street design because, and again, I have to give a shout out to Councilmember Bender as well as Councilmember Gordon for working, us working together for we have a complete streets policy in the city of Minneapolis. Yay. And that is where we're going to be able to get our biking options, our walking options built into how we build our infrastructure from here on out. And that is going to address the question of communities that have historically been left behind. And the equity plan has been built into both the parks and the streets.
I want to try and open this up and again try and draw out some of maybe how we can make some decisions here. Is there something the city's not doing right now in terms of transit or in terms of walking, biking, infrastructure that you think that we should be doing?
Yes.
Okay, good. No, do you want to?
It's interesting to me because I'm a biker and I've worked with people who are involved in creating protected bike lanes in downtown Minneapolis and elsewhere. But what's been really interesting to me is the number of times when I meet with people, they bring up bike lanes. And, this is a big change for our city. Not everybody understands it, and I think what the city really needs to do, and this is along the lines of the minimum wage conversation, is the city really needs to do a better job of listening and building support for what happens in our city. Because, if you have a bunch of people out there who feel that they haven't been heard, they don't understand what's going on, you tend to get a lot of resistance, and that's not anyone's intention. We want a bikeable city, of course, but there are a lot of people out there, and I'm telling you, in every conversation conversation I have, it comes up. And that just tells me, not that people are necessarily opposed to it, but that they have not been brought into it and they don't understand why it's that street, why it's at that location, why there aren't more people on it, and it interferes with them driving around the neighborhood. The other thing is that we are a city of about 25% seniors, and a lot of them aren't riding bikes. And so we need to spend extra time encouraging them to understand what the process is. Okay, that was a long answer. Okay.
No, that was great. Aswar, yeah?
Yeah. Do you want me to talk about specific plans I have as mayor?
I am interested, yes. And is there something, especially in the relation to our question from the audience, that you think?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let me just get right to the specifics. If I'm mayor, this is what I'll do. Currently, we're on track to having 30 protected bike lanes by 2020, 30 extended more miles. Currently, I think we're at 97 miles. My goal will be to up that to 50 because we do have the money for it and we do have the locations that need that extension of the protected bike lanes. That's one of my main goals. And like I said before, the two jobs that the mayor has in the city of Minneapolis really is budget and police. So that's something the mayor can actually do, is correctly invest in the right areas. And the second example of that is, for instance, pedestrian safety. There are parts, and of course one of these is near the home that I grew up in, 22nd University, for instance, is an area where they've been waiting for 2 decades. The Botno neighborhood has been waiting for 2 decades to get a pedestrian crossing light up. These are things that need actual investment. They are not that expensive, and they are things that need to be done. Now, let me tell you how I'd pay for it, because that's a crucial part of being a mayor. I would cut out these unnecessary infrastructure investments that the city keeps making over and over and over. And I think Jacob Fry's is the People's Park, and Betsy Hodges is the Convention Center Plaza. $11 million for the Convention Center Plaza, which the city of Minneapolis itself ranked as the 95th most important infrastructure project out of 97. So we're spending $11 million on that, but we don't have enough for, 20 more miles of protected bike lanes. I think one is much more important than the other. Vote for me, that's the kind of person I'll be, that's the kind of mayor I'll be.
Okay, yes, Representative.
Yeah, well, I would say first off, we need to have a wide range of transit options for people. Not everybody bikes, not everybody drives a car, not everybody takes a bus, not everybody jumps on a train. But everybody needs to get around the city. So I think we need to think about that long and hard. I would propose that anybody that makes less than $15 an hour have access to free transit in our city. Because I think that one of the number one indicators of moving generationals out of poverty is access to transportation. The amount of time that people spend some time is critical.
Can the mayor do that? I'm asking sincerely. Isn't it a Metro Council question?
It could be a Metro Council, but if it was a priority for the city and the city council and the mayor agreed, we could figure out a way to figure out who those individuals who are making $15 or less, and we could fund their access to transit. Absolutely. If we keep thinking about what we can't do, we're never going to do anything. So one of the things that I think is also important when we think about complete streets, our city has grown up over the past several decades around being an auto design city. And that creates a lot of inherent problems that we have throughout the city in getting people access. So pedestrian issues, biking issues, all those things need to be done. And I would just add that I love what's happening with biking. I love what's happening in pedestrian parts of the city. I would love to see it happening throughout the city. I live in North Minneapolis. We do not have a lot of biking, and we do not have a lot of pedestrian ways in our part of the city, and there are other parts of the city. So I think we need to say that we've done a really good job of expanding what we have, and let's look at those parts of the city that we haven't done a good job in and begin to make those a priority.
Great. Dr. Levy-Pounds?
Yes, just to piggyback off what's being said, I see the issue of transit and especially surrounding biking and being a pedestrian as an environmental justice issue. We know that so many people who want to protect our environment are taking that particular route, which I think is important, but we need to make sure that we are building bike lanes across the city in a more equitable manner. I also live in North Minneapolis, and I know that there are not enough bike lanes and not enough safe passages to walk for residents who live in the city. And for those residents who choose to take alternative forms of transportation, it becomes a public safety issue in terms of being concerned about being hit while trying to ride your bike or walk. And I just actually read a study recently by NPR that talked about the high rate of pedestrians being killed in the city of Minneapolis by cars that are driving by. So it is a matter of environmental justice. It is a matter of equity, and I think that the city can do a better job in that area. But I also commend the city on the changes that have been made thus far.
And Councilmember Fry, did you have something you wanted to jump in with?
Sure. So in this last year, I've made the transition to being on my bike about 80% of the time for my own transportation mechanism getting around. And while the individual that asked the question, Katie, I believe, is coming downtown from uptown, I've been heading across the Central Avenue Bridge from northeast. And at the very beginning of my term, there was a very dangerous stretch of road, which was right down 3rd Avenue. I was riding in the gutter. I would pretty much hit my handlebars on the side view mirrors. And right now, there is a fully protected bike lane. Now, it would have been better if it was fully planter protected, but we are making progress. But there's such a bigger vision out there. I mean, we could be extending the Greenway all the way to St. Paul. We could have better connection between North Minneapolis and Northeast Minneapolis, North Minneapolis and, quite frankly, the rest of the city. And this is not just about bikes. This is also about multimodal. What about BRT? Why are we not focusing on it? I feel like we've dropped the ball, and I think right now the mayor, collectively, we as candidates for mayor, we need to be picking up the ball and running with it right now.
Okay, so we are getting towards the end of our time, and I have a couple of pressing questions from the audience, so I want to get these. So first of all, we're in Ward 10, so we couldn't get away with not having a question about Kmart. So I do want to. No, this is a serious question. So we'll have a school board debate later, I promise. But on Kmart, this is just a yes/no question. Do you support using city funds to reopen Nicollet Avenue at Lake Street?
Yes. Heck yes.
Next to tearing up the streetcars, putting that Kmart at closing off Nicollet at Lake Street with that Kmart is probably the worst city planning decision that we've made. Yes, I support opening it up.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. All yeses down the line. Great. Easy. In the interest of time, this is a really important one, and it did come up in a couple of cases here. Is the question of immigration, and we've mentioned that we have a new administration in the Trump administration, and he has targeted the idea of sanctuary cities, which Minneapolis is one of. And so I'm wondering if each of you can speak for less than a minute, and I understand that that's hard, but I want to give you all a chance to speak to this. What is the role that Minneapolis needs to play, and how do you, as mayor specifically, what policies, what things can you do that protect the people who are here, people who are here undocumented, as things change on a state or federal level? And Councilmember Fry, you haven't gotten to go first yet, so sure.
Well, first off, we, and I believe every single candidate up here, believes that we need to be standing up for our immigrant community, we need to be standing up for our Muslim population, we need to be ensuring that every single person has the ability to live here in the city of Minneapolis. I think that's absolutely critical, and I think we can all agree. Second, now in addition to the political and social resistance to Donald Trump, which we inevitably do need, we also need legal resistance. Now, when you look at specifically at Donald Trump's executive order, it calls out sanctuary cities. Interestingly, there's no clear definition of what constitutes a sanctuary city. Now, in Minneapolis, we have a separation ordinance, which was authored somewhere in the range of 2003 or so, which said that our cops are not to ask the question as to whether the individual is documented or not. And because they haven't asked the question, we haven't gathered the information. And because we haven't gathered the information, when Donald Trump says, give us all your information, our first response should be, we don't have any. Second off, the statute that he's using to try and deprive us of our funds is Chapter 8, Section 1373.
I did say minute answers, but...
I'll go quick. And this statute and the use by which it's applied, it's been said, even by some of the most conservative justices on the Supreme Court, that it's unconstitutional due to its ambiguity. So we've got every mechanism within our toolbox right now, and we in the city of Minneapolis need to make sure they're used.
Dr. Levy-Pounds, did you...
So I agree wholeheartedly that we need to be standing up for our immigrant community and ensuring that we are a sanctuary city through our laws, our policies, and our practices. Not only does that extend to standing up against the Trump administration, but it extends to our current policies in the city, making sure that we're not participating in programs aspects of our immigrant population as terrorists, participating with Homeland Security, attempting to divide the Muslim community and to use scare tactics upon the rest of the population to fear our immigrant community, which is unacceptable. We need to make sure we're not protecting slumlords who discriminate against our immigrant community under the threat of eviction if they complain about the dilapidated conditions within their buildings. And we also need to pass a $15 an hour minimum wage, which would impact our immigrant community as well. Not to mention support for minority-owned businesses, in which we know that our immigrant community participates on a regular basis.
Tom, yes? Did you? Yeah.
Ditto most of what Nikema and everyone else has said. I mean, I don't think there's any disagreement among the people who are sitting here. I do think that one of the things we should be thinking about is our communications plan, you know, to the broader public, to everybody in our community, so that they understand, you know, where things are at, that we're countering what they're seeing on television and hearing on the radio every day, because God knows every time Donald Trump tweets something, we all have to hear about it for the next week. And we need to counter that. We need to make sure that we're getting good information out there about the value of our neighbors. You know, this is not just a moral issue, but it's also an economic issue, and which, you know, it is important. And we should be talking about all of that, the value that everyone brings to our community. Thank you.
Keeping in mind that unless somebody disagrees that you don't disagree, Representative Dean, do you have
No,
something to add?
I don't disagree, but we need to be real about the ability of our non-documented and immigrant folks that live in our city. And if we're going to be a sanctuary city, we need to be sure that there's actually a place for them to live. Because without actually having housing that they can live in, we can say we're a sanctuary city all we want, but unless we create environments for those individuals to bring up their families, to do the types of things that all of us who are here, who are not immigrants, come to think of it, we're all immigrants, except for indigenous folks, just a few centuries removed from immigration. But we need to really be real, and I think we need to even go farther, that we need to prepare some of our communities in addressing issues. What happens when an ICE vehicle comes into the city? How do they respond? How do they notify friends? All those types of things are really, really critical.
Aswar, yes.
Yeah, as the son of a Muslim family and an immigrant myself, it's not a distant thought for me by any means, and there isn't a day that goes by that I'm not grateful that we're in Minneapolis, because whether or not we admit it or not, Minneapolis has a culture in which a proposal like that of kicking out people who've come to this country and try to build something for themselves, it's laughable. My friends and I actually have laughed about it the first time somebody tried to attack Minneapolis for being a sanctuary city. But here's the thing I need to reiterate. We are in the good fight. We are going to fight until this administration is over, and then we'll fight beyond that too. But here's the main thing. To fight, we must be strong. And strength requires good government. Strength requires having financial reserves. If Donald Trump, and believe it or not, I mean, the real tool they have, the weapon they have against us, is financial retaliation. And Minneapolis right now is not in the financial condition to fight back properly. And so what I think is, for the next mayor, we have to be sure that we are a strong city, because we're going up against a big monster, and it's going to take a long time to beat them.
Okay, fantastic. And we are but Mayor Hodges, please, yes.
Well, Donald Trump is trying to punish cities for standing up for our neighbors. And we haven't been letting that stand in Minneapolis. And I agree, we are all immigrants or descendants of immigrants or indigenous people or the descendants of slaves. But we do need to, there are things that we have already been doing. You know, we have our separation ordinance, and we are fiercely defending that separation ordinance. And it's not just police officers. No city employee will ask somebody about their document status in the city of Minneapolis. Councilmember Glidden and I put more money in the Civil Rights Department, knowing that more discrimination is happening, knowing that hate crimes are happening, more money in our Civil Rights Department for enforcement and to work with other units of government to make sure we are coordinating our strategy. We put $35,000 in the budget on behalf of our immigrant neighbors so that we have some money in reserves to have a strategy moving forward. And I am in conversations, and there's a community conversation about building a legal defense fund for our immigrant neighbors. And I'm talking with my colleagues nationwide, mayors from LA, mayors from New York, mayors from around the country, about what can we do in concert with one another, because cities are the front now. We are the front. We're at the forefront because we are the front of the fights that are happening.
Thank you so much. So we are at the end of our time, but I want to give each candidate a chance at a closing sentence here. And I wasn't going to ask this originally because we're coming up to the caucus, but I got it multiple times from people in the audience and on Twitter, which is people pointed out we have ranked choice voting, even if you're not thinking yet about fall, if you have to make a second choice. So in a sentence or maximum two, make the case for you being somebody's second choice. If somebody's got their mind made up on somebody, why should you be their second choice?
Yeah, look through the recording of this event and count how many actual ideas were Minneapolis, and I think I'll be the second choice from a lot of people.
We're just going to go down the line, if that's all right.
Look to the things that were promised 4, 8, 10 years ago, and then ultimately see what was delivered. And then also thank you to Councilmember Bender for the forum.
I think of myself as a first choice candidate, so I would ask you to check that box.
That's fair.
We made a decision as a community 4 years ago about who we are and what we were willing to do together, and the wheel to which we would put our shoulder together so that we would be a community where everybody can benefit from and contribute to our prosperity and our growth. I think that's still true about us. It takes transformative leadership who every day gets in there and does the work of governing and leading. I believe that I am that leader, and I ask for your first choice vote. If there is somebody else who is your first choice vote, I ask for your second choice vote for those exact same reasons.
So if you like what you heard from me today and are interested in learning more, please, of course, go to my website, Raymond Dean, and that's DEHN.com. I've been doing things for the city for the past 15, 20 years. I look forward to continue to doing things for the city for the next at least 4, hopefully 8, probably 20. It depends on how long I live, actually. And I would just say that I ask for your first choice. Should I not be your first choice, or should I not be able to persuade you to make you my first choice? I would ask that you seriously consider me as your second choice.
Tom Hoke.
Well, of course I want to be your first choice.
I figured.
Yeah, okay, but you know, I will tell you that I have spent my entire adult life making Minneapolis a better place for people to live, work, and play. I've been your public school teacher, I've been an attorney, I've administered the Public Housing Authority, I've been the chair of the Downtown Council, I've been the chair of neighborhood associations, I have pulled together the arts community to create a vibrant theater district in downtown Minneapolis that attracts nearly 500,000 people a year. I think that you can count on me with my experience to exercise the judgment, the temperament, and the integrity to do a great job. Thank you.
Please, a big round of applause. People here, people watching us online, thank you so much for the uptake. Thank you. One of these people is very likely to be your next mayor, so please, they will all be in this room, and you can go and meet them and talk more or meet with their campaigns. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Have a wonderful evening. Walk safely. I'm going to turn the mic to Lisa Bender.
I want to make sure everyone knows they can join us at Lynn Lake Brewery afterwards, where our friends have been having a great time watching the event, and that Our Revolution is having a candidate caucus training on March 20th, and you can find out more from them. Thank you.